Namo Guru Be Namo Buddhaya Namo Dharamaya Namo Sanghaya Namo Guru Be Namo Buddhaya Namo Dharamaya Namo Sanghaya Namo Guru Be Namo Buddhaya Namo Dharamaya Namo Sanghaya Kande la ye guen ye do kane ra ga jo sa mo de jo zhen ze she ye ya bo guen ye lo san se da je ba ne de je so so de ye na ga se de be de che ze la ma ye be zo ga che da lo de be se yo na ye jo do de ba ye che ye ja shu so so xie je 上主念表旁多的还有马上就灭谢了马若切马也马个能给我你所做让人也解决我丢son教别用来上子路丢用头来的高用的爱来高用的爱来什么高的不的所有的用头高用的高用的爱来高用的爱来什么高的不用的所有的用头高用的高用的爱来高用的爱来什么高不用的所有给人东张接受是我面对你别见到这我当这我这些别送天天真了就所见别也就也没有多照Let us cultivate bodhicitta motivation, all the altruistic motivation, seeking complete enlightenment for the sake of all other kind sentient beings. And with that kind of motivation, we should participate in this Lamrim teaching teaching on the stages of the path leading to enlightenment, and so we should dedicate, whatever positive energy we are going to create at the end towards that end. Allow me to read about page 2 from this text to give you the blessing of oral transmission followed by explanation.
통마라 대바지 빌샤데네 니메테 빈드베데 텐셰 버송베 윤데데 달로 닝도보니 톰데게데 랑게 동아 남제 다바메메로 당게 버정오 심지베 저용 염모여 닝제 느데로니 제제 닝지 느데로니 제제바니 제바쇼 이시처 제딩제 가자와다 고르는 담벌에 송송송 장비비 드비심지와 응고송 지체니네 가라장비 원도 진저 롱도 제인라 요는 도목베 도이주소 정네 준줄레 로드로 예사리지와다데 지티진 케베디제스라 시다시다시바다디 케베디제스라리시바자 예본주진소 송소 Dela midu amandu nawa yang simje do sanje so chuchi nyamba sanje so jo nyong de mo la ji ma la so bi jo la la jang mi lo jang rong lo jang rong shi de dong ba ma so wa de de mo bi se mi la dong ba so ne se mi di ben ju bi se so xie ba de cha de 고려도 레벨로 도와달라 페베제 상제소 제제저 컨토머도 되냐와테는 뭐베 스무스 강변제 동바송 저나라 쇼바테네 휴비스미제 쇼셰스베지로 데라 길레몬데 나야마저소 지바시바야 쇼레 쇼로테노 자발로손 다신제 변도 마제베니 미상바니 중주레 건시 건던 건식다 당신은 예뉴드 자버더베디 다도신데 제워라저 상위 탐보 저저시 동제데 조시바디 군신들 중제 동지바디니 다데들 몬디샤베 그 치바랑 도제 뭐 통신 도제베 디제 제버도 다데 신주 등의 다양도 저 뭐지 샤니데메라 제 과나 더 미제송 바더 다 제버제 뭐 그거 고다시 제버서 푸순서 단위 내서 사모 다신라 다제 사모 고문노 제버니 뭐네 라고 다시 뭐 민도는 집어제와 시 저치 tum버시네는 자와 때문에 미가와 전부제와 다 로코메지도 시베나 달라 신신다신라 다신도 따와 고나제 데베디레 칼레 신도메샤데 갈즈라벤데 더 콤베데네 강게 민드 직바양 데니메 나메가 제셰다 달르네 신도 두샤바데 다가메츠 헤데베신제르 다글르메베 텔라랑글로 제도 제주냐노 류데양 파미코달르 트바이 현재리 제샤예리 저바 인정고 콤베온게 가든젠바 자와터 힌르라 랑게 제제브란지 뭐 고마세나 제데디리 테베 제다르시 다게 코타게들로 체제 응은진 세바다 티셰셰로 콤바르 셰조다 베요다니 밀레 프라사바 베니 닝타바니 대고발로 조슈제라 콤바세나 제는바용 동아데 다셰제베 수고베르만 Da xin je xie ba dang da, da je xie ba dang da xian du xia xie xie, da du xia xie song ba ni xian lang nga wu nyam du, dang ti ye mi la so ba nga ye wu nyam bi lo zhong lo zhong lo zhong ma zhong men ji. Rang la je bra zi ba dang xian la ya de lo ni ko sa ko je de xian la rang de je ba. Zi ji rang la xian de ya de be lo je wo ti chi da gi de wa dang xian ji dung yin. Je ra song ba ya da jin zi da da ji la da de ne. Xian da gi de wa la xie ya chi ri xie be go jin xian ji yan jin la yin de de ne xian ji dung ye ya wa do wa kai. This was Chijir Shiva Day and Dono Rangi Dewa, Meda Shinjiva Dung Sevi Tong Jubo Lodi Jungwana de Kigni de Randa Shinji de Duke de Dada Shini Musre Dar Sosoro Risoche New Jubazi de la Tembe de Dula de Ngay Juba ma se ora cha wo de ni shin ji bai bi nyam ni yon to bi ti ye nyen bu nyam bo ni da da shin ngo wo ni je so so ri so je ba mi de pin ju de ne da la shin jo lo je shi lo da go je che re de ba ri su re shi no pe na pa ri la de ngwe ni pa ri lo je yo pa ri chi no Suri lo je ba xian no ten de dong bo ka ten na ngo bo ka do sum ngo su la due yang ngo bo ni je lo je ye da ka do xian je lo mi je wo de men zhao wo de da yang la du le da xian ye nyam ni kong xie be chang zhe sen ne den ba je da da xian ye de ba de ba zhe zhe xie xie zhe ngo de rang ge ba re mi kong la de no su re je re da xian rang ge mu da xian rang ge ma zhu na kong la de de xian de je re xie de ni ye xia ba zang an ji be rang ge ngo zhe ba me ba zhe song so da de gang zhe xun zum de ki da ti ji sim ji gang xie de da ti ji sim ji ko rang ngo xie sa de ngo de da ene kar sa chun do de da kar sa mo sim da ju sim ni yo
So people read from page 48 to page 54 and stop in the middle of page 54. So we have been talking about how to cultivate spirit of enlightenment or bodhicitta through what we call 6 causes and 1 result meditative instruction. So now we are at a point where we talk about what is the nature of spirit of enlightenment or bodhicitta, and what kinds of spirit of enlightenment or bodhicitta exist. And so broadly speaking, we talk about 2 types of bodhicitta. One is aspiring bodhicitta, or Mönzem in Tibetan, and the other is engaging bodhicitta or practical bodhicitta, as some people translate it, or Gyeltsen in Tibetan.
tere da karsa te munju chewa de jidan da paji ga se ba jidan senyi go she na ene be ka yi sa dang bo se ene mo song se ko je de ju mo bo yo de la mo de zhe ma zhe song de wa she da de ba sha da don da ding man de she na jun ju ne yi xie ene ko je de da mu bu ne de zhe she na ene chang shi sen jie ne ene chang dong song sa偏见的人就是些，他成都毛生过心机，他们这毛生生多那对着，但主要的主要一些这个，这玩意的小心嘛是小多啊，对，他们像心机呢，这路过嘛是吧？但东北说那老不给那个我一头肉的种了，就是小多啊，我这想起来。
So how do we differentiate between aspiring bodhicitta and engaging bodhicitta, if you ask. We may find different explanations about this if we refer to texts such as wisdom gone beyond or prajna paramita perspective, or we look at Shantideva's perspective in the Guide to Bodhisattva's Way of Life. And so in the Pranjana Paramita perspective, we might talk about relating bodhicitta to different spiritual grounds, or we call bhumis, levels of bodhisattvas. So we are not going to go there, or at least yet. Maybe that's my footnote. But we will stick to what Shantideva says here. And so in Guide to Bodhisattva's Life, there is a stanza somewhere it says, just as there is a difference between wishing to go somewhere and actually going there with that wish, so should you understand the distinction between these two minds of enlightenment, right? And so just as we know, there is a difference between simply wanting to go somewhere and, and accompanied by action, right? You want to go somewhere and you're going somewhere, right, literally. So in the same way, we said there is a difference between aspiring bodhicitta and engaging bodhicitta. Now, another way to put it is, as Geshe explains, that when we generate bodhicitta without taking the bodhisattva commitments or the vows, that bodhicitta is we consider as aspiring bodhicitta. But once we take the commitments of the bodhisattva vows and then engage in the bodhisattva activities and actions, then our bodhicitta is referred to as engaging bodhicitta.
Because that's something and children young love Malago Tenegon Shadow, Cababio Martakaji, Dobo Masuna, Shasu Simchas of the son, and she knew Laja love Shogura. That is Shimju of the Golden Tamil Shidua, till any Shasu Sim Dombasong till Shaggy standing a shot. But the Shipchat of Shina and Java love Juomot, Shasu Sim with Dombalang in it. Java the tennis on the Ennis Muslim Castle Juxmin, the Kongita, Golden Tamil de Redwa.
So on page 49, those of you who have the text, you can see that we have a passage quoted from great Indian master, what is it? The stages of meditation. And so in that first stage, I said the first version of the stage of meditation, the passage quoted there says that for engaging bodhicitta, one has to make the bodhisattva commitments or take the bodhisattva vows. Otherwise, one's bodhicitta does not become engaging bodhicitta. Sometimes we hear sort of in a very generic statement, we said the difference between aspiring bodhicitta and engaging bodhicitta is aspiring bodhicitta is when you develop the aspiration-seeking enlightenment, but you don't engage in the bodhisattva deeds or the actions, 6 perfections. But when you have bodhicitta and you engage in any of or some of all of the bodhisattva deeds, and then it's engaging bodhicitta. But it's not quite that, as we rely upon stages of meditation where it says, now it's possible that one might generate bodhicitta and engage in certain bodhisattva activities, but that does not qualify, so to speak, one's bodhicitta as engaging bodhicitta. But one should take the commitments or the bodhisattva vows and then engaging in, right, becomes engaging bodhicitta.
Oh, there, that Kursa Disha, Delaya, that Dubdel, that Tenjo, the Ronjuba, there's Ronjuba, Judun Lansan, the Tando, Muslim shower, Sajeva for the shower, Duba for the shower. That Tenjo taking a Chiat, or Judun Lansan, in it that Jusuma to Yamari, Muslim Yamari, Musu Solon Kanamato Yamara.
So the Ronjuba is such Jeba for the Muslim Chadaguru.
The Rojulu side, Dumbo for the Muslim shower. Judum Tosana, Muslim shower.
So now Geshe says, remember he said, according to maybe Pranjana Paramita perspective, we might find perhaps the exposition a little more complex than what's stated. So what is it? If you ask, if you look in the philosophical schools of thought within Buddhism, according to Savatandika Madhyamikans, right? For them, even if you have taken bodhisattva commitments or the vows, and you engage in bodhisattva actions, activities, your bodhicitta, from the first spiritual ground all the way to the seventh spiritual ground is still considered as aspiring bodhicitta, not engaging bodhicitta. But once you hit the eighth spiritual ground, then your bodhicitta becomes engaging bodhicitta. That's what the Savatandika Madhyamikans says, right? But according to Prasangika Madhyamikans' perspective, once you take the bodhisattva commitments or the vows, and then engage in the bodhisattva actions or the perfections, then your bodhicitta becomes engaging bodhicitta. So for Prasangika Madhyamikans, aspiring bodhicitta really exists on the path of accumulation, right? And thereafter, really it is more like engaging bodhicitta. So we find the perspective differences on what is considered as aspiring bodhicitta and what is considered as engaging bodhicitta, or where do we find the aspiring bodhicitta and where do we find the engaging bodhicitta. It's kind of quite complex, isn't it?
Oh, that person del Gelemo the Matu said that Ronji Kora Nanzela and the Zaka Tonum Java Tomum Chebo Chasa and Nonzel that Ronji Shigo Laya Meta Desert, that is Shumuko Matus. That Nipa did Karsa. Dahi Yamji got some Giata. That Dahi Yamja said, Yama he will take Kajam sort of shasha. The Shuja Jaw don't know you all Namandoa. That didn't room don't about it and the longer than what the Shara in Mother Nayamarva.
No.
What did that be? Goju sort of she took share, and the dinner party that Logi more that didn't that the Shega said Tinema and then the Dahinyam Jeti, that talking of Shani, Mimbo Yong the Gagas, Tingsang and he had Shara and some of this.
No, so
Shara Mada.
check up. And so now we move to the next section, which is on page 51. It's not numbered, but it's a 51. And the caption reads, exchanging self and other, in Tibetan called Dakshin Nyamje. So another meditative technique, or we call pit instruction, menga, for developing bodhicitta is equalizing and exchanging self for others. So this was considered as a very sacred and secret instruction initially. It was said that great Indian master Atisha, sitting over there, he only kind of transmitted that teaching to his principal disciple Domdemba. So only Domdemba is almost like ear-whispered lineage tradition, right? Here's the secret, you keep it. So he got it, and then from him it went to great Kadamba Geshe Langri Thangba, my second footnote, right, the author of the 8 verses mind training. Yeah? And from there went to the Geshe Sharawa, yeah? And then slowly came to Kadamba Geshe Chekaba. And so Sharawa also kept it very secret, Langri Thangba too. But then Geshe Chekaba somehow publicized it to some extent, right? So from then onward, now today what we see is that this instruction is talked about in a public setting. Okay? So it became a public discourse. So thanks to Geshe Chekaba, right? So now this instruction has become has a public access to it.
Oh, the logic that Shirashumo, Chekawa did, because shocks of Jenna, and cut the Yiga Hill, the Chontuboga Rangle said, this special civilist.
No, sir.
So the Tati, the you got Dagma in just the Tati. You know, long time while you are sitting that shows you your man.
No, sir.
Lots of the pay, they are getting lots of Goma Zosaris.
No, sir.
Yeah, you know, that Shara is a Sungju Yamamo, Dahinyamji, Sungju Kaimana, Sungju Hintamato.
No, sir.
근데 가서 왔다 저제 거라고 참접해서 돼 봐입니다. 그래서 근데 샤라 배웠다 샤가지가 들어서도 근데 봐 스쿠센데 땡제 내가 대 카드 제가 했는데 저도 보가랑 해야 돼. 이게 라스무스.
No, sir.
그 카드 쇼 양도 가지고 간다지 나지.
No, sir.
이 마기 상로데 땅데 때때 소소지 강에 중디산 상로도 팽에를 이제도 가래 있나 그 저지스 승로 나스 히브레사.
No.
근데 다데 콩도 가래는 와도 기자 다데 콩들 엔데레스 고벌로 다다데 나게 멀리 되면서 세야들와
No.
어데레스
No, sir.
루도 세마시그라 와스
No, sir.
콩데레스 데는 사제거나 근데 남가데 녀서 말하는 사지가 말이 소레사
No, sir.
근데 저는 엔토지생 양알 나로나 쉬는 근데 저런 당에서 봐 쉬는 로투고 그래 송레사
No, sir.
로투 휴다
Bonus. Um, so Krishna said he would like to give you the contexting of how Geshe Sharava received instruction on exchanging self for others from Geshe Chekava received that instruction from Geshe Sharava. So one day it is said that Geshe Chekava, he found a kind of a statement or a piece on a piece of paper, I suppose, or which just simply said, take the loss and for yourself, but give the benefit to others. So he thought, this is very interesting, right? And so then he thought, like, is there anybody, is this an authentic teaching or not? Or is there any master who really has, insight into this teaching? So he kind of inquired everywhere, right? And then they said, well, somebody said, well, Geshe Langri Thangpa, right, was the master of this instruction. So he went in search of Geshe Langri Thangpa. Then sadly, he received the news Geshe Langri Thangpa was gone already, means passed away. So he said, wow, now who's the next? And then slowly he found, Geshe Sharava still lived at the time. So he went to meet Geshe Sharava. And so he said in the teachings of Geshe Sharava, but Geshe Sharava never talked about this teaching, right? He would teach any other things. He waited, and he thought, wow, he's not talking about it. So what is this, right? So one day, when they both were kind of walking or strolling somewhere, then Geshe Chekava said, Geshe Sharava, I have something to ask you, right? Would you please take a rest? And he put his sen, right, so as a mattress, said, could you sit here? I have something to request you. And he said, okay. He said, well, I found this piece of paper which reads like, take the loss, for yourself and give the benefit to others. Is this a really authentic teaching or not? First, I want to know. And then I want to learn about it, because when I have difficulties, I think about this. This gives me some strength. He said, I like it. And then Geshe Sharava said, of course, this is authentic teaching. He said, you can trace this back to what Nagarjuna has said, where somewhere, in Nagarjuna's works, they said, you should dedicate your virtue for the happiness of others and take others' negativities upon yourself. So he said, so can Nagarjuna go wrong? He said, no. So this is authentic teaching. Nagarjuna said it. He said, wow. So if this is authentic teaching, I would like to receive teaching from you. He said, well, it'll take 6 years, for me to teach this to you. So if you're willing to stay. And of course, Geshe Chekava said, sure. So he spent 6 years listening to this particular teaching from Geshe Sharava.
Geshe Sharava did ya pesi kaje in the there's months of me months of song is months song ne in the consumer the chila z janget so gangaji zene the hibuta do gorisa
No, sir.
and Geshe Sharava they should see what is
No, sir.
and you might 그런 꿈지 도인지 최신의 시자에서 말 샤라 대화 용해서 말다 비자 나자르와 이 코나데 시도하지 근데 샤라데 이 그런 꿈지디 컴백 잡을 가서 주고 다 깔리 가보시겠어 예나 시에다 근데 다다데 미디어 트렌 동원한다 가서 거기 로종 세긴 동어디 왔어
No, sir.
아우 다 녀도 퀄리티 자신 거 뭐, 다 매신 다 해서 그 암조 거야. 다때 팽팽이어서 있어. 인터넷 자시 못 당해도 된다고 그래서.
so. So Geshe Chekaba received this, practice lineage instruction from Geshe Sharava for 6 years. And then Geshe Chekaba started to teach it a little in a small group, right? He kind of teach a little more group. So he made it a little more public, of course. Because, the motivation behind that was that at that time, kind of leprosy became a little bit, spread out in the locality. And for some reason, because of his bodhicitta and this, somehow this was, turned out to be a good treatment for the leprosy. And so then many people got interested in this. So as a matter of fact, everybody thought, well, let's go and ask this Geshe about, look, so he has a leprosy treatment. That's what they said, about his discourse. They said, well, let's go to his, Geshe, leprosy treatment, So then another time he said, one of the persons, maybe related to him, who really did not have faith in him, but he's a family member, so probably treated him like, my family member. But he somehow, this guy might have, he was really terribly sick, and he might have heard about this teaching through somewhere else, right? Not from his Geshe Chekava. And one day, Geshe Chekava just kind of went to check upon, right, his relative, what was doing. So he kind of listened carefully. And he was happened to be reciting some lines like that, give the benefit to the others and take the suffering, something, right? This mind training practice. And so then Geshe Chekapa thought, wow, I think it looks like this is, right, kind of a catching wind, so to speak, and maybe it's beneficial, right? And so that's how, so he was motivated to spread it more publicly. And that was kind of his motivation.
What did you need? That 제가 그 로중 돈님이세 돈다 dinero. What did so any corner base that shows you some bit comment be 정보 시비제 any 그래서 이제 예전 시험보다 년저 시험보세 가지 시험만 정지야도와. 어디에 그 똑바니네. 엔타야 시험은 주도세 배 링도 톱네. 답이 딱딱 그런 데 제소스. 에네 지샤가라모 데발라 에네 베녀와자 그게 이제 고마티니 심지어도 되지데 에네 샤가라모 에네 다 쉬어봐셨는 거 아니야 지서 말해 쉬어도 다 쉬어봐셨는 송세도 direct 다가 또 버닝 게지
And so Geshe Chekapa completely dedicated his life to practicing equalizing and exchanging self for others, this instruction, and he taught it more publicly. So through his practice, he became highly realized. And in the text, there's mention of how he achieved, 5 great qualities or realizations. They said a yogic realization of something, Nenjoba Chembo, and great virtue realization like that. And so at the end of his life, he was already a very realized being, and he really wanted to be reborn in the hells because he knew where the most suffering is, so to help beings there. So that was his wish. So he said, okay, now I really want to be reborn in the hell to help the hell beings. But then he started to realize that he wasn't going to be reborn in the hell. Okay? And so he advised his disciples, I think you please try to make an extensive offering, because I'm not realizing my kind of a dream, so to speak. I wanted to be reborn in the hell, but it's not working out now, So that story tells us, how, before his a time, he already become highly realized, a master developing bodhicitta.
다 보여디 중단부터 다 통마대부터 다 예수님 보셔라. 단다들 지다기디 걸 조사로 가시 비즈명하데 셈지야다 다이심지야다 다이nhân 셈지야데 지진자면 셔라지 셔라네다 디나마칸지 쇼제라마 라기다다 엔라마 셀링바다 키지마모로 디나마 주네오 투리에 된조리 셔다 주바드부터 테레 다 디나 티시바 다 가르도세나 디송 다 딜라 가제데다 로라테네 장발라 솜레세 다힌제 Any Dahin Jerry Payon the Majibi Yimi Samba Nesta tingi no je arwa da yin je na ani phe yo khadi sha wo ma je na chong khadi sha wo res tang wo de sam wo res wa da
And of course, Geshe Chekawa is most known for authoring a 7-point mind training or lojong text, which becomes sort of a fundamental, root text for lojong teachings. So as we talked about the lineage of this tradition, some time way back, this particular meditational technique to develop bodhicitta, of course, it started with Shakyamuni Buddha. Then it came to Manjushri. Manjushri transmitted it to Shantideva. Shantideva, to other masters like Ajahn Somnavidpi, or the master from Golden Island. And then slowly that's how it came to Atisha, and Atisha to other lineage masters. So that's our lineage from whom we have we receive this particular instruction. And so on page 51, so the outlines has it that training our mind, right, in this particular tradition, there are three things. First, we want to think about the benefits or the advantages of exchanging self for others. And we also want to think about the demerits or the faults of not doing it. That is combined as one, right? What's the benefits of exchanging self for others, and what are the demerits of not doing that? Okay. Okay, that's where Geshe stop.
Oh dear, da don't da pay you somebody and ranging in somebody pay you somebody juju did do a da the hen and you the Javan there, da the hen the Jawa, certainly a Java shot. She had did the watching about the good that the daily shunks. What this part in your tap pay on the consider this or that. Can you da the hen and you the Java, so that in so the land may be Shanju Tava the Yata. Hen big land may be Shanju go share the Kansai swing and that is the order. And it did that hen Java, yes. Because that the Hindi Joasha, San and Tamba Java shas. The San Tamba said David repeated that Jidan Love John 10 minutes that Hagumiti. Dahi Jedis on the Yanchi Bay, Shibu Indo was in Moses of Yasha, or Tingira. To tell what she said, someone like Dahi, you were this is it. But this year, the Edicarasan, not the Doi Kazi, Joalia, and Sanya long. She would say that Chanya third of that you said anything is good. Any change in the interview is good. That never doing it to the country that call it doing it that ranges in some race or that they want to be conject and change in the some race. Doing it in the Dajin, that consider changes the pay on the what the song. Did they watch you think that Hende Delation said?
So at the bottom of page 51 or page 52, so we have a couple of lines kind of highlighting benefits of exchanging self for others. And these lines come from Shantideva's Guide to Bodhisattva's Way of Life. And I'll read this first and then translate the explanation given. I quote, "Whoever wishes to quickly protect self and other must exchange self for other. Practice this excellent secret. Whatever worldly joy there is arises from wishing for others' happiness," unquote, right? And so these lines tell us the benefits of exchanging self for others. And the explanation given is this, that anybody who really wants to become enlightened, for both self and others, he or she, they must, do this practice, because this practice is essential for actualizing enlightenment or Buddhahood. But then this practice should be kind of treated more like what's called secret. Secret in what sense is that is something you do in your mind, not sort of like a showpiece, like, hey, I'm an exchanger for others kind of thing, come to me or something. No. It's not a propaganda tool or material to boost one's public image or something. That's not the it's secret in a sense. Keep it in your heart, train your mind and keep it there, right? Don't, be boastful and arrogant maniac, out there, talking about it. So as we often, hear masters tell us, that every really goodness comes from cherishing others, right? Attitude. And every problem really is related to, it arises from self-centeredness or self-cherishing attitude, isn't it? So if every goodness comes out of cherishing others, that's related to exchanging self for others, isn't it? Even it is said that in a hot hell, if there is like a moment of a cool breeze, you just feel a little bit of that. That itself is really attributed to, the virtue of cherishing, others. And even a little pain is really attributed to, self-centeredness.
No, that Jide Dunga Tigu Dr. Delation, Monty America, Shiva Rang Tonsi, the Tumashin Tonsi, the Chaver Taste, or to say the Washer, Dide Dunga Shiva, near Dungani, so they can guide the Dr. Duration race. That country, not the kitchen of Wishi, we haven't do so. And that's not about the common in this. 다시 이제 제발 제 이제 제발 제 상하게 와서 먼저 다다 드려 마중산 될래라 와서 제가 들을 때는 하고도 와서 이 다다도 다다도 상지 치료돼야 저 있는 도매 상지 저 상주들 말아 더 먼저 지바시 이는 다자도 발람고 상지 이는 먼저 다진디 시티들 레라 와서 왔다 들어 왔다 거지.
So on page 52, to continue reading the lines quoted from Shantideva's Guide to Bodhisattva's Way of Life, whatever worldly suffering there is arises from wishing for your own happiness. What need is there to say more? Look at the difference between these two. Ordinary persons act for their own welfare. The sage acts for others' welfare. The sage meaning Buddha, right? The Muni, which is the Tuba, right? When he translates into English, then it's no more Buddha, it's a sage. It's supposed to be Buddha. Okay? So as Geshe explained, that in every kind of suffering we find in samsara, right? The worst kind really exists in the hells, right? And then at any other levels of the samsaric existence is really related to or connected to cherishing oneself like anything, self-cherishing attitude, self-centeredness. And so here the Shantideva says, what need is there to say more? Just look at the difference between Buddha and us as ordinary beings. And that difference will tell the whole story, isn't it? So we look at Shakyamuni Buddha, right? So Shakyamuni Buddha at a certain point of time decided that he would follow, so to speak, what my professor, a new paradigm he created. Like I say, I'm not going to behave like any other beings. I'm just going to think differently, right? So there's a paradigm shift in his mind. He said, instead of cherishing myself at the cost of others, I'm going to totally cherish everybody else, right? And so not only he did that, internally, but he also followed that, bodhicitta mindset and engaged in activities benefiting other beings. So he stayed the course, right? He followed the paths leading to enlightenment. So finally, he became a Buddha. Okay? And so we have remained the same, right? We maintain the status quo all this time. So therefore we are left behind, isn't it? So there was a time. I mean, the Buddhist literature, as we say, we never think of somebody who is kind of a born Buddha of some kind, or never having to work a day, but really just you appeared from, by osmosis, kind of Buddha, right? There is no such Buddha. Okay. Buddha is a product of hard work, training, really. And so Shakyamuni Buddha was just like us before, right? Very ordinary being, cherished himself like anything, So he stayed on the same like us, deluded and all of that, egomaniac. And then somewhere he changed his mind. He said, this is not working, right? Kept me in samsara too long, so I'm going to have a paradigm shift here. And he followed a different route, and then he became a Buddha, and we still follow the same route, and we remain here, right? So that's Shantideva said, just look at the difference between Buddha and ordinary beings, and that'll tell you the difference, the benefits of cherishing others.
어때? 다 당신 맞이는 같이 가르치잖아. 근데 당신 제만은 나는 상지가 말이지. 상마제는 다 코알 대신 집어인데 거 상마제인데 가르치. 코알 등에 맞아 요 말았어. 디데 다 등에 면도시 근데 대화 되듯이 주는 다시 제고. 다 코알 파 등에 서위 있는 다 코알 되는 들어. 어떻게 그러라. 여자 저 상지부터 코알에 대화 메시지도 그래다.
And so the last stanza quoted from Shantideva's Guide to Bodhisattva Way of Life on page 52 reads, if you do not genuinely exchange your own happiness for others' suffering, you will not achieve Buddhahood, and even in cyclic existence, you will have no joy, unquote. And so as Krishna explained, if somebody says, you know what, yeah, but I don't want to do that. I don't want to exchange self for others, right? Well, if you don't want to do that, right, although it doesn't say here, maybe it's your right. But then you have the right to stay in samsara, that's what it is. So you are exercising your right to be in samsara, and then samsara is not a beautiful situation to be because it is fraught with all kinds of problems and headache and suffering. Okay? But we believe that nobody wants suffering and problems, right? If that's the option, then really you can't say no. Right, unless you want to say yes to the problem. Okay? And so that's basically what that stanza says, that if we do not care to cherish others, right, exchange self for others, then we will never become a Buddha, and then, there is no end, right, to our problems.
어때 다 커서 대화면서 제송부터 당신 다 제반제반 그바군지 고당 현재바제바 푸송서 다지지 아니 내서 사모스 어때를 봐 제가 다지지도 다 제약제 단다 디게시 다디 사모도 단다 세이를 보시나 단다 지도지나 아니 담보 아니 당지세야디 당지 되게 되는 가 링링 제다 아니 텔 자신 분지 아니 라지도 세야 지고 봐 제가 되게 다 지진이 다다 니 롭종도 가서 다 랑지다 당시 냠도 없어지 차차차를 쉬고 그래디다 당진이 오늘 자상의 당진 문제 접시에 니 현유다 되다 제자다 저 라동령 거라데 마기 지단이 가고리다 롭데 버시나 배는 언저다 사모르 단다 현진디 가서 랑지디 에니 그바고지 고다 현진디 연대고지 계시네 어디 내 마음부 상동에서 척초 저기저기나 당하서 배는 면도다 침사 찍으려이나 침사 뒤나 비게다 파마부이는데 가세네 그가 비게 랑제드 비게 슉슉 보면서 매일 튕기듯이 매일 사모야 뭐 동게도 나서도 예지고 샤워와 딱 소소 계시지 않으시도 되는 나서 집어 샤요 말봐 다때나 얘는 총이나래 총제리나래 얘가 pen디나래 어떻게 틀림시네 애는 소설 켈레야 사무투 마다신 현 데바티나 애는 기부간가 되오샤요라 어딘데서 이러와
So on page 52, it is stated that we should recognize that self-centeredness or self-cherishing attitude is the source of all suffering. It's the door we open, towards all kinds of suffering, whereas cherishing others is the source of all good qualities and excellence. And in the Lojong practice, mind training or thought transformation practice, oftentimes it is kind of a, the self-cherishing attitude and self-grasping is conflated. They kind of treat them as equal or kind of, bunch them together, and, they really don't seem to differentiate that much often, right? But in other contexts, as we say, that first, there arises grasping at I or the self, Tibetan called dagzing, self-grasping, isn't it? Because I is the most important, of all phenomena. And because it's the most important one, and then the next, automatic reaction is I have to cherish it like anything, right? The self-cherishing attitude comes because it's the most important thing in the universe, right? So therefore, that self-cherishing attitude is induced by this kind of ethnocentric, ethnocentrism here. And so that's how the self-grasping, this ethnocentric view gives rise to a self-cherishing attitude. So the point here is we should try to, work with our mind and at least reduce this self-cherishing attitude and promote cherishing others, right? Other-oriented attitude, as we say it. And so that, has a lot of benefits, even in ordinary lives, right? If you have a family with how many family members, right? If the family members think a little more for each other than, for themselves, then there's more sort of a love and care and harmony among the family members, isn't it? The same thing in a community. If the community members really think more for the community and less for I, so that community seems to be thriving and more harmonious, right? The same for a country. If the, a countryman or the country humans or whatever, country citizens, I don't even have to talk about this, really, think more for the country and less for the, individual self-interest, that country is going to prosper, it will be more harmonious, and same thing in the international area, right? Now we talk about in the spiritual context, right? If we have other oriented attitudes, so that brings harmonious relationship among sentient beings.
What did it say that Rojin Pigata, Ganga Guva Shungdon of Karesana, Pena Sojun Rojina.
No.
So the Yaman sort of Kursa, Dobjin Shaiton does a Yaman sort of Maga, Kanji Kanta is Rajin the Tik or Kevzara, the Ton design, the Legatin Judua. Stangonzo, Rajin the Danzi sort of Majin attack, Yona of Jena, Kanju sort of Chairman is Sagimara, Komaku, Yaku, message you. Stangonzo, this also Yundo to war.
No.
The decision sort of a Jiva Hen Pendo share, it's so the so much and the Jackson Majesty, Kumamagushi dogs of joy in the tell a dialogue of Gia Yomara.
No.
Ganga Bay, Tunum Kora Motosia, in Lumbakoral Pentoya Motosi, Nujizan Yomara. So that to the Gangu on the pen, many Jamdasho, Kaji, now I'm going to say at the Yomare. Nganza ta phel dide ya gombadwal thawas so as bijade janela name ge jade jade yo mare o tisунde ta konje nganga sa ti o kwaji badi do wa o dita ga so ya kogyun jo marwa ko so samodon ga je lumba se ne ago wa ba.
I think based on our own everyday kind of lived experiences, we can find plenty of examples how a lot of the negativities are related to kind of self-cherishing attitude, right? So if self is the most important thing in the universe, we see it as, and we cherish it like anything, then anything related to that self becomes so important, and we are ready to do anything and everything to protect it and to promote its goals. And this is how we find ourselves engaging in negativities, including killing, isn't it? Right? So because we love to eat meat, right? So we kill animals to eat the meat. And so it is just like, just to satisfy the selfish interest of I is so important, so we have no regard for others' life. And if it means killing some beings to satisfy our needs, we are ready to do that, right? Because that we can see. Or that, we have no qualms about lying left and right or cheating and deceiving just to protect the self and promote the self, right? And all of those things are related to self-grasping and self-cherishing, attitude. And even to the some very kind of silly things like, and the example Geshe gave, I was kind of chuckling over it, is like in the monasteries, when the gong, hits and they have to assemble, right? So the monks rush to there, and sometimes, they push each other, happen to, right? Just that will make somebody mad, and somebody gets so angry, right? And even that, just you got a little push because you're all trying to get into, right, the assembly hall, And that's because of self-cherishing attitude, right? You couldn't even take that much, somebody happened to accidentally push you off the, or even little fight or quarrels that we have, is we are just trying to defend the position of the self-cherishing attitude, the self-grasping, and kind of a, how should I say, so all those activities, as we say, are related to self-centeredness. On the other hand, even in our communities, who are more dedicated for the well-being of others, right? They really don't think much about themselves, but they think always for the benefit of others, or the community and the country, whatever case may be. And these people really gain a lot of respect from the other people, isn't it? And these are the people, who really, it's very hard to find an enemy for them. Because when you are doing everything for others, others, like you, or they respect you, even if they, don't anything. So there is no enemy, really, for the people who are so other-oriented and other-concerned individuals.
제가 답변은 몇 개주 희귀가 수 상어다베나 this 상어가 야만으로 소도 가자니에서 강제 롱조 즉나가 세신 시야되다 것도 용조세 세계 야모고세 다들 몇 개주를 효소는 집가리는 거잖아 근데 다 등에 맞아 용하야 말아 세다 그 지게 등에 지어더니 다들 동세야 때내리기도 어디 다 티가 능우좀 봐더니 가서 남자가디 제요 말에 야당 웃음다 마당 웃음도 그래서 아셔 말에 그래 그래서 당보 희야 소리야 짜는 찍래서 이제 주고 시도 말아 당보 찍 수도하고야 레라자니 땡기제 근데 바타르지 나타고야 소리 강갈래고로 그래서 너무 고수로 다 다다시야도 따고 말아 소소 용도 저거로 그래서 그 상황도 근데 봐지네 근데 딘지부 치마용이야 용 So
the point Geshe tries to make here is a lot of these things really we can understand based on our own personal experiences in everyday life. That when we find ourselves doing any of the 10 negativities of body, speech, and mind, it's primarily related to the self-cherishing attitude, or that we are doing it, to protect the self, or what we consider as mine, isn't it? All my buddies, family members, my friends. So there's a whole circle of, right? Maybe we have a whole kind of but we don't use that language, but maybe it works well here, the gang, right? We have create a gang around ourselves, right? So first, I want the best of everything of myself, that self-cherishing attitude, so I'm going to do everything to defend it and to protect it and to fight with the whole universe. And then it's not about me, but then it's about somebody related to me, mine, right? My family, my friends, my buddies, whatever, right? So I'm ready to, right, do anything and everything. So this is how we find ourselves creating a lot of negativities, the negativities of body, speech, and mind. So when we create them, the outcomes are going to be suffering, isn't it? So from this point of view, as the line says, the whole world's suffering arises from cherishing the self, isn't it? Because we cherish ourselves so much and we do so many negativities, so a lot of the suffering that other beings are experiencing are because of us, what we are doing right to them, as you can see. And so it's really important for us to find those personal relevant examples, everyday experiences to understand these things, right? But even as Geshe was talking about in the study, monastic, they said, one of the best evidence for us to develop confidence in the teaching is if we can have some valid experiences to verify it, isn't it? And there are a lot of those things, And there's once we, then there are other things we have to use the inferential reasoning, right? Because of this might be happening, right? But wherever we can use the valid experiences to cooperate, right? All this, the veracity and the credibility of the teachings, we should try to do that.
rāngshī chōngā tī ngā tā tsōng tī shū rō mō yu tā gāngā tī tā wā kāchī tī nē sō pē nā tā kumā rū chī kū yu nā mī gāngā mī tē pī pū sō rī kō kumā rī sī yā rō shā tī tī nī bē mī yā jī sō sō sēn tī lā rā tā tā tsē chī mā tā lī tā nā mā sō tā ngā sī shē wā rō wā tā kā nā jī kī tā kā khōn rō shē nā mī khōn rō tsā wā kō tsā mī khōn yu kō rā rā kō mā rō wā 샤그로 미라 년가요. 근데 이마 뭔가 샤고 이제 내 시간에 부터 해서 샤그로 하시니까 샤그로
So Geshe said, so we can find plenty of everyday life experiences, how, self-cherishing attitude, prompt us, or that's the ground we stand upon, and we engage in a lot of negativities, and that brings a lot of suffering to other beings, and also brings suffering to us, right? So he said, perhaps maybe we don't need to talk too much about it. We have so much experiences here, we can discover for ourselves. Let's say if somebody is in the habit of stealing a lot of things, and pretty soon, right, everybody finds out that is a kind of a thief among them, and so maybe he is recognized, and now the whole community is kind of excommunicating, that person. So it's very difficult to live in the society. Or like if somebody is a very short temper, who can easily flare up. So usually people find it hard to deal with that, people. That's why Geshe was chuckling over this, when they first moved to South India, Mongot, where the monastery is reestablished, and they built new rooms, right? And people who are very short-tempered, it's very hard to find roommates for them. Like nobody's like, no, I don't want a roommate. No, I don't want his roommate, right? So even you're not going to get roommates now, right? That's the how it is,
现在就把这个你头对对咱，那可以咱下去如果到外头出家的，是这个我这样。
Right. He said, this is not telling like a story here. This is true. He said, and by circumstances, whatever, if two of those monks have to live together, just they have one heck of a time living together, fighting and all the time. So it's kind of an abusive relationship, right? There. So a lot of unhappiness.
생각될 때는 누구인데 가서 용도 고트만 삼도 쓰기도 저소도 고트만 삼지로 와. 다 페요데라 다 가지 가다 이제 대화 가지 다다 베게 다기 시와나 이래 냐가 저니 사이에서 애니 베게 롱스부터 저에게 좀 신시에 될 애니 해진지 좀 쓰고 와. 뒤용 답변도 다파 당기파 대신에 시행을 베게 팬도 접시는 애니 시행을 베게 소지야 세워 맞아서 그만마고시 소소비게 스칼라티비르는 헬 짐바다 세바금 those 드어디베이나 에디 디비델 야세들 동해지야면도 다고 겨와인자 세시말이 그 디비디 데도자 아샤그러와 어쨌든 디레소르시는 에 거사 헬진디 게하고 디레소르 더 초지는 단다 윤대 명아 능나니 에니 마시 데리가 디가 자라와 어디
So the point Geshe is trying to make here is through all possible ways, really we should think about the benefits of cherishing others and the problems of self-centeredness or self-cherishing attitude. Like if we are kind to others, and let's say, we never steal anything, but at least that has created quite a security for other people, isn't it? They don't have to worry about having us around them or at their home or whatever, because we are the trusted. We're never going to steal, right? That's kind of a sense of comfort for others. Or that, we, practice whatever we can, generosity, helping the poor and needy, or being patient with difficulties, and when others say little unkind things towards us, things like that. So in this life, we get along well with a lot of the people and the beings. And of course, because these are all virtues, these virtues will bring positive outcomes definitely in the next life. So we have much better possibility and chances to be in happy migrations in our next life. So it's good for this life and good for our next life, as we can see.
어디 다들 헬 비게다 마시 텐디 비게 마시 비틴 주강라 다다디 텐디 쳐와서 자여라 마시 내가서 에네 심제 강가 베까지 시험을했어. 가르서는 먼저 다 소소사도 다 그래서 세점 송세야 저 지마 동세야 그거 심진을 쉬고 걸어 봐. 심진은 소소야 면도. 더가 너지 그때는 가서 대시거다. 먼저 사기 두지 공부 간가. 심진 현다 된兄弟아지 봐. 어디래? 빼도 현다 먼저 비게 잡아도 먼저 용지에 피네지 애니 가야 기야며 파와 기야며 용무지 디바 주디고 저 디바 주디데 애니 공주라고 사주라고 통주라고 심대메와라고도 어다 디소드 lumba ganga ji와로 봐 소소소 종로를 전다 배지 떨어지면 소소 가서 하기거든 가야 신고 말어 봐 시야도 시에 코로나를 해야지로 봐 다만 시에야 되고 근데 다 같이 말아 소소 비가 레갈리는다 양면에 지금 총장은 자 직성으로 왔었네 다들 용 알리 총자가 문다 들어서 lumba코는 송게 첨도 간가 거로 와 되면은 문세야 지금 말어 봐 저도 뒤에 간가 간제 푼수서버 간가 영화데 도 삼로 당서는 신제 현 영화데 간다 무슨 주고 봐 어다 뒤서 다내 망보베 소 현된 까지 가지 되고 딱 소도 간제 로 쪽도 삼지로 와
Then we can also draw upon recognizing all beings as having been our kind parents, right? Remember the kindness, all of those things, that relationship we have, like a parent-child relationship, as talked about in the other instruction for developing bodhicitta, can be brought upon here, and see why we do need to cherish, all other beings, because without them, really, we can't exist, and our needs will never be met. Okay? And so it's very important for us to recognize that. So it is said there's a special way to remember the kindness of other sentient beings. But other way is thinking about how sentient beings have been our kind mothers. Right? That's one way. But another special way to remember the kindness is called that term. Right? Is that even when sentient beings are not our mothers or fathers, like there are many situations, still they are very kind to us. We are very much dependent upon them, right? Even for our basic necessities of life, food, clothing, shelter, all of the things. As Geshe said, for example, somebody like him or the monks, right? I mean, he came from India empty-handed. He said, I had nothing here. But I hear all the needs are taken care of because of the kindness of others, right? I'm fat, I have a beautiful place to stay. There's nothing to worry about, right? So it is because of others' kindness that my needs are being met, and so has to remember that. Or like even when sentient beings are not our relatives or friends or that kind of kindness, without sentient beings, really we can't do our practice, right? We can't practice generosity, we can't practice patience, we can't practice ethics, So all of these practices are contingent upon, right? In some sense, the kindness of other sentient beings, and so it's very important for us. We might have difference in terms of our mental abilities to be able to imagine all those things, but to whatever extent we could do that, right? Think in all possible ways how sentient beings' existence is essential for my own survival, right, needs as well as for other needs. So that's very important. And sometimes we might also think this way, like, yeah, that's kind of, but I'm working, hard like anything, So that's why I work. That's why they're paying me. If I don't work, are they going to pay me, right? So, or that, well, I'm a very good business, person, and I'm working hard, and I design everything, and so that's what it is. Not so much of their kindness, but I'm giving them something. But if you really think deeply, all of these things are still contingent upon the kindness of others, right? We think about the business. It's a system we human beings have created, others have together, right? And we have a transaction of money. Money has only value because we decided to give value to these currencies or the pieces of papers or whatever it is, right? So together we have created all this social world, right? The money makes some sense, or working conditions and different types of business, different kinds of professions, right? It's because of everything else exists, so therefore all these things are possible. So we are not in a state of vacuity, thing like, because I work hard like anything, and so therefore why do I think about their kindness, I should be paid for my work. All this paying and not paying, the work schedule, everything has been socially created, right? Contingent upon others' cooperation and things like that.
어때 다들 지도 가사다 마시 텐전인데 텐전시 인데 들어가서 전소시 다 디가 뒤집어도 지금 봐. 다 디가 텐전 캐러와서 돼. 다다 당신이 이거 텐전 캐러와서 돼야 돼와. 이 텐전 캐러와서 당기들이 강직한다 이제 마시에 내가 마시 나야 윤도 가도 이나 심진 진시 보셔야 돼. 텐전 캐러와서 해야 돼와. 다 뒤줄에는 동네에서 검색지에도 봐셔도잖아. 근데 따님 캐러와서 해야 돼와. 저 따님 캐러와서 돼 되다. 그지 야, 저주스님이 구매해야 돼. 니게 다녀서야 심지어는 이런 사람 해야 돼와. 단다 다녀서야 심지어들이 대화된데 뭐냐면 서야 돼. 거기 참배디 컨트롤. 어때 뭐이 셰페지 근데 동네 뭐이다 닝제도 지다 찍바라. 디다 도시야 오래 알레 티송는 적세.
So if we compare and contrast the two instructions or techniques for developing bodhicitta, 6 causes and 1 result instruction or technique, and equalizing, exchanging self for others technique, a lot of things are overlapped, right? There's some maybe a little bit distinctive here. For example, like recognizing sentient beings as having been one's mothers, remembering their kindness, thinking of repair their kindness, that could also be integrated with equalizing and exchanging self for others. But in this particular case, equalizing and exchanging self for others, one distinctive thing is we said a special way to remember the kindness of sentient beings, which means even if, in the situations or the times they have not been my mothers, but still sentient beings are very kind to me in many other ways, right? That's a special way to remember their kindness, right? My whole existence is dependent upon them, their needs. So that's something a little bit distinctive to this equalizing, exchanging self for others. And then, of course, in this particular case, we talk about the Tonglen practice, the practice of giving virtue and happiness to others or dedicating it, and taking upon ourselves the suffering and its causes, right? So another distinctive thing that we talk about this particular instruction is Tangyom Kyebarwa, a special kind of equanimity, we call it, right? In the case of 6 causes, 1 result instruction, we said at the beginning we should cultivate a sense of equanimity or impartiality or something, right, according to the translation here. But that has to do with the recognition that we said all sentient beings, have been our friends, enemies, strangers, whatever. So we're trying to have equal attitudes towards them. But the special kind of equanimity, Tangyom Kyebarchen, that's more related to exchanging self for others, is related to thinking, is more kind of connected to cultivating love. We said that all sentient beings are equal in that they want happiness, right? They're all equal. So we just recognize that kind of. So that is, as we said, all sentient beings want happiness, wish for happiness, right? So then we wish them to be happy. So that's related to love. So that's called thinking a special kind of equanimity, cultivating.
어제 동네에서 당고 추일랭 그랬어. 그래서 다 가르쳐는 매직비에 라고 매는 쪽대나. 인 콜이 약고도 가서 두고도 톱시 가서 진짜 콜세다 요 말아. 다 추이 동어제 신시기는 그 좋아서라도 요 말해. 어제 당고 추일랭야 등은 추일랭야 미고셔 그랬어. 다들 심지어 냠타바 카이제 지난 저거 텔 망도 지난 저거 거기 때는 심지어 탐지에 지난 저거 소도 공적적으로 셔야지. 애니 비가 소소 너고 예반이 농야 텐디잖아. 이 심지어 뒤동에 소야 렌시 인가다 당신 진지스야 뒤에 매번 소소 뒤에 뭐가 쉬고 다. 된다고 여 봤다는데 소소 계산도 간가 이 심지어 될 봤당시에 인 콜이야 나다 동에 가리 나와 델리에 들어가고 뒤 뭐가 쉬도 뒤에 정해야 되다.
So how do we do the Tonglen practice, the practice of giving and taking, right? Not give and take, right? Giving and taking. Or at least we try to word it differently, to mean it different. According to what Geshe explained, that first we should train our mind or visualize taking others' suffering upon ourselves, and then practice giving, right? First practice taking, their problem and sufferings upon ourselves, and then practice giving them the goodness or the best of everything. The example he has given is, let's say if somebody is, a hand is caught in a fire, right? Of course, the first thing we should do is like try to help him or her get the hand out of the fire, right? And then treat it, and then we can give whatever so that he or she can enjoy it, right? If you just let the hand in the fire and try to like, hey, you want this, right? Chocolate here or something. He didn't say that, but that's not going to work, right? How can you enjoy that? So we should practice taking it first. And of course, we can turn our mind with regard to one single sentient being, right? Depending upon our mental abilities. So think about somebody, and then we said, I would like to take his or her suffering upon myself, and as we inhale the breath, right? So we visualize taking his or her problem to ourselves, and we receive it into our body, and then at our heart, we can visualize the self-grasping, self-cherishing attitude. And as the problem sort of hits that self-cherishing attitude or self-grasping, we can visualize that self-grasping is dismantled or destroyed, right? By the power of taking this suffering of the others. And then we visualize giving our virtue, the best of everything, to this other person as we exhale the breath. And then we feel that he or she receives our gift. And therefore, his or her needs are met. If somebody is sick, it's not sick anymore, right? If somebody is hungry, it's not hungry anymore. Receive the food, right? And so think about that. So this is how we practice Tonglen, the practice of taking first and followed by the practice of giving.
Oh, dear, says that the Tonglen said, Tanakanto Jangyari, Nazati Muva, most of Yamarva, the Komosona and the Patoya, the Tsulia, when the Chansangi became your Sigdua. Because the champagne was there, I think I'm in the Sungsha, they go, Pajosia, they kill it. Those you got you should came at the tears or and champagne should go my sauce. That cannot visit something. It didn't divide the kill Naza marriage. Champagne was the killing they got to the tongue doors. The patient or the social matter. And the other Jizumela, that the Geshe said the tofu door. Tofu and Geshe said, Tomo tofu, you can get correct. Tofu does future. And you thought that took new hit of country, some Tagan, so that's it. And that's all give them what they do. You Perista, did you mention boy out of you? She what was?
No, sir.
I think God is Persian.
No, sir.
Said that boy had the that when the children that boy you the already that boy has been dus.
No,
It is the medicine was the door.
no, sir.
Says the Marisi, Poros. And that's the Mele, I died and yet Gansan the children. Chow Marisi.
No, sir.
It is Pogo.
No, sir.
I literally make that, and yet Nazad gold Pogo, and it's task.
No, sir.
And it's Dimela Gomruji, and you should gold, God be King the Yoke, you see the words.
No, sir.
She said, that come you do the break at the boy at the Yamar, sometimes not for us, Uzu.
No, sir.
Uzu, it is photo.
No, sir.
That was another arm, Martin Bash, in the Korangi might get Lega Ganga, some Gil Koran use.
No, sir.
That be Soba Hiroji and the bed teaching jail and the bed Naji Cartajav, she's a Ponglashin. And the Gishito was a Juza and Jidin Milegia in the Nolia. There's the old strong chadwa.
No, sir.
It is Milasha and the Pigeon Locazin and Blow Mobocon Geshe Boresa. The Lojo Tongo Ganga Koran, the Tiga Desha Shadow.
No, sir.
What did you your boy? You said, there's the bay, some years I had the Omara.
I think in Kishere, the red, Ming Kishere.
Geshe Sobos to dog Geshe in the country. That gave him the Geshe said the Omara.
So Geshe is saying that, of course, at our stage, and especially in the beginning, as we do Tonglen practice, we are using our imagination, to the extent possible, to take others' problems, suffering upon ourselves, destroy our ego centrism, and dedicate our virtue and best of everything to others, right? And feel that they have received and fulfilled their needs. So it's all like mind training and imagination, visualization. Really, nothing is really happening in actuality, right? We're just training our mind. But as we train our mind consistently like that, once we really become proficient and realize, right, this kind of practice, it is said that we can literally take others' pain upon ourselves. And there are stories about that. And one story, Geshe said, really, this is in the Buddhist textbook. It's not a story told from mouth to mouth, but this is it's about the great master called Chamben Nenj or Maitri Yogi, right? And it is said that Maitri Yogi, at he was always teaching, but at one time when he was teaching in the locality, I think somebody kind of harmed a dog, maybe hit the dog something and the lower part, right? Somehow he took that pain upon himself and he kind of, jumped off in his teaching, right, the throne, and he got hurt. The dog was fine, okay? So he got a pain, and you could see the mark, right, on the lower part of his body. And that's how, like, somebody who became very proficient realized they could literally take somebody's suffering upon themselves. So they said that lower part of his body was swollen for a couple of days, because of taking that pain. But another story Geshe told us about the great Yogi Milarepa, right? So it is said that, of course, one time we don't know whether there's a real Geshe or not. At least has the name of a Geshe called Sopowa, right? So I was checking with Geshe, is this really a real Geshe or just somebody with a name? We don't know. So anyway, it's called Geshe Sopowa. So he was very jealous of Milarepa's, reputation. They become too popular. Maybe he's also a teacher, I guess. He didn't like that. And so he wanted to get rid of Milarepa. So he basically, persuaded someone to bring a gift to Milarepa, something eatable, and it was poison. So he really wanted to kill Milarepa. Yeah. And so this person, was persuaded, and so he gave the food to Milarepa. Milarepa ate it, and but it really did not do anything, right, to him. The poison did not harm him. So one day, this Geshe Sopowa himself wanted to check upon that. Okay, and I want to see, he's considered like realized being and all that, right? So I want to just find out, right, how he's doing. And he realized that he seems just normal, so it didn't affect him negatively. And so he just went to see him. He said, that I heard that, you got poisoned by food or something, and, how are you doing, and nothing like that. And Milarepa knew who sent the gift, right? So he said, I'm all right. He said, I wonder, how much pain you feel, and wants to know, right? And I don't know whether I can handle that kind of pain or something, but, how do you do? Milarepa said, you don't want to wish for the pain, it's quite, it can be painful. He says, I just want to experience a little bit. Is there a way to transfer your pain a little bit or something if you experience anything to me? He said, I don't think it's a good idea, or you will like it. You can handle it. He said, no. He said, okay, Milarepa. So he kind of insisted, and Milarepa said, okay, let me try to transfer some of my pain to the door, like it. You can watch it. So he did that. He said the door shook, the frame, right? But he thought, he's doing magic here for me, confused me. He thought, no. He said, no, please, give a little bit, share your pain with me. I just want a little bit, not the door, like me, right? So Milarepa said, okay, then I'll give a little bit of it. So he transferred a little bit of the pain, and he just couldn't take it anymore, okay? And then he realized his own, all that negativity, and then he confessed, he was behind who sent the poisoned food and everything. He said, I'm so sorry, and because of my jealousy and everything, I confess to you. Now please accept me more like your student and teach me practice. So that's how then later, he received teachings from Milarepa, and he practiced. And actually he said when Milarepa left the world, Geshe Sopowa became quite good. And he reached somewhere in his practice. So we will stop there today, and we would like to welcome your questions, observations. And this is page, volume number 2, page 52. Yeah. Start it off, please.
Okay, well, too loud.
Yeah.
It was said that self-cherishing arises out of self-grasping.
Yes.
Now, and it naturally arises.
Mm-hmm.
If does that mean that we cannot eliminate self-cherishing completely until we eliminate self-grasping?
Mm-hmm.
In effect, become an arhat.
Okay.
So only an arhat is eliminated.
Okay. Yeah. Dagi ken dit kana so an khar shore ta lojong na so in de gala ya ta tangjin da jin jin ni nyam do so sha wa gen ta ine chida sung me na tangjin gi ene ken chen jin jin ki go sla wa gen ta go za chung shi se ge za an din de yin be yin na ene chin chin le ta chin chin le me ba cha le wa ge tangjin le chue gu gu le bes din de yin be yin na an cha chung be go ba ma do ba do tangjin le chue gu yo mar wa gen an chin chin le chue si mar ba kan de les ko da 다 당진유는 진지유에 잡아들린 것도 하게 하게 저저 진진래 최고고유에는 당진래 최고고로 왜 당진래 최고고에는 자주마마다 봐도 당진 최요 말서 모르게
자주마마다 봐도 당진 뭐다 진진 저거 말을 쓰고 그러와
라래
진진 저거 말을 쓰는 되게 이제 자주마도 진진 참은 요러와 자 숙제도 가서 나이도 요 말이면 가져서 다시 해야 돼요 되어와
다마다 겐디스르다 당진 찾아 방찬 마신 된지를 최두고 말씀 드리고 그러게
그치 되게
노사 다 찾아보기 당진 마방 될 셔고 왜 맞아
다시면 당진 마방 셔고 말해
안 당진을 최서 대 진진 요로
진지다
진진의 당진을 때에는 찾아보기 당진을 줘야 돼요 진진 용신 말씀听没了 당에도 쓰네요
대단 단다보도 다 당진의 진진의 소원인자 근데 되게 다 진지의 연구 말아 쓰고 그러와 그래 다 변 랑동로디 요래 진지다 단다 지당 그 소소 랑동로 이데 카가면도 그러와 다 자자발 베지 라지디 메스는 되면도 그러와 알아
现在经济没不晓得당진没不收过来是吧他真的랑동 글로마的经济有嘛是I just trying to make sure that Geshe understood the distinction. So going by that contention, that self-grasping induces or gives rise to self-cherishing attitude. So that means to get rid of self-cherishing attitude, we have to get rid of the cause, which is the self-grasping. Yeah. And so in the case of arahat, right, somebody who has abandoned self-grasping has become an arahat. So in one way, position we can say the arahat does not have self-cherishing attitude. But that said, I think perhaps there's a distinction between self-interest and self-cherishing attitude. Arahat is still interested in the self-interest, right? There's a self, but there is no self-cherishing attitude. So that could be one way to look at it. Rather, this Arahat has self-interest, but no self-cherishing attitude. Okay, yeah.
My question was about the possibility of eliminating self-cherishing at all before we become an arhat. Can we even eliminate it? If it naturally arises from self-grasping, that means we cannot eliminate. There is no way, because that's the topic: is the ability to exchange self-rulers, and it seems.
진진디 배방토에 레미도 와스러게 대이벤 다단다데 신진지 제거스 레버와 저는 가고 싶이 차도 라 선거서로 와 안에서는 자전바 마다 봐도 당신 방도 당신 방모든 진지 방도 말와 지디 다 신진지 신을 제버진도 가고 싶이 차도 거로
다다 딩야 해야 돼 되다 가서 다저부터 사본지와 봐야 되와 다다 것도 저다 문주와 봐야 되다 저 문주 저도 간서 파상장장장 이게 누자 말에 뭐 공공지대 누자 제 가로 채나 라미고시는 공야요 말에 되레디 단단 것도 장야요
알아가지고 이내다 진진디다 가자 문주와도 고는 두고 왔어
고는 두고 다 사원도 방도 말와 라가지고 사원도 방도 말와
Yeah, that's a good question. Geshe said, what he's talking about here is that we need to train our mind to reduce the self-cherishing attitude, to cherish others. So we are talking in terms of overcoming what we call the manifest forms of self-cherishing attitude in our case, because we cannot get rid of it until we really get rid of the self-grasping. But in the case of arahats, right, they have not only get rid of the manifest form, but they really uprooted it in some sense, right? The seed is taken out of. So that takes a while. But for us to be able to cherish others well, if we can overcome the manifest forms of self-cherishing attitude, right, that works. Yeah, it's good.
Did sorry, that pen, Nanda Tanda Kale Jig. Muju go near me, but when it's some by the Tonton, what the Bayamara, Yamara. That those citizens can control the park, Muju Kage, do what to send, and the Congo is on Tono Tots and the Ali control may have Chagra. That is Tadanga the Yumo Manga, and Tagas lot, Yungashi, give out the Yung share. That is Miko Kage, and give out the much than they in the cosm, those citizens. Ya tong the sad of during the done, can you guess him the manga? You move the young door. Say down to this.
So when we look on the sort of, I should say, spiritual progression, so our really real hope at this point is to be able to overcome manifest forms of delusions, including self-judging attitude, and to try to reduce doing the negativities and. But until we really reach the first spiritual ground, really we cannot start to really, start to even think about uprooting the seed. So we are just building all our energy to be able to get there. So once we achieve the first spiritual ground, now we have actual antidote to be able to start to work at the seed level. And so from then onward, we see like a more positive experiences, less delusions, less negativities. It's more like more positive and neutral karmas, right? Some kind of not so negative. So this is how we progress, in a different way. But until then, our experiences are a lot of delusions, a lot of negativities, very, less virtues. So this is our situation right now. So we are trying to work at a very different level, right? Try to overcome the manifest forms of delusions and negativities. Yes.
It's sometimes it seems for many of us practitioners it would seem like, oh, but I'm such a nice person and I'm generous and I volunteer here and I do this and I do that, and it would appear as if we're doing pretty good in the self-cherishing department, like we've and yet at the same time you would hear Lama say this is all a pretense, it covers up something much nastier underneath. So to the practitioner who's trying to go and distinguish where we're cherishing out, what should we look for? Because that thing is sneaky and can get covered up.
Sure.
So
what should we? Okay. 뭐라 간디 쉬어디 디슈고 이렇게. 다 초전에 가서 뭐부터 삼로당한테 되가라다 제단 가서 간가로 지게 최라 인유에 떠나시 부케저로 와게. 그 시대가 간가로 저직시라 딕바세 지금 매버서로 뭐 지금 와게. 개발을 오시기 위해서로 침바당기 위해서로 지 인도 가버셔로 와. 자자니 딘데스 유에 되가라 딕바시라 맞은데 그다음 가서 개베신 가서 다디 삽사 맞잖아. 아니 디차이니가 그래서 소소 고고 당내로 와게. 지기 위해서로 저다 다 가서 냠렘 받지 임배 차는 오늘 디 다 가서게 sob주에서로 와게 마인보다 원에디 지기 유명기 따사로 지어 말 와게 가르레를 삼을 땅고 거기서 와게
문제 따라 대사래 방군이 셔버와 다 상제 다 미제가 지어요 말이스 소소 가시 바가시도 상제는 바사요 말이스 거라 방부 당부 지로와 방부 이번 소소시고다 소소 다들 문에 자자 이 순간 지대 시기로 메다 문에 자자 그 신예 발 Jimbari tangan di ngune de ngara di tse di jimbe lungso ya di ge ja me kho rang phenya kho me ngara de di me sa so pangbo je ta ne khari so pangbo pe go ta pangbo ni ra la le o pangbo ni go no so yi chen de go ta
no so pangbo ni zo so so no so Geshe says yes, just as in the mind training text that so we could think of two types of witness to our practice. Okay, ourselves as a witness to what we're doing, and somebody else, right, as a witness, the others. In other words, the others here we really need to think in terms of, let's say, enlightened beings. There's nothing we can conceal from enlightened beings, right? We can kind of confuse other people, right? Project that kind of nice image, and I'm really a generous kind. But Buddhas cannot be confused because of the omniscient mind, right? So we say, okay, I cannot really cheat Buddha. I can maybe cheat on others, so I have to be accountable to Buddha's witnessing what I'm doing as a practitioner, right? But the other one is, which is considered more important witness, is yourself to what you're doing, the sincerity, right? If you are practicing generosity, then you should check your mind whether it is you are doing it with some ulterior motives or it is contaminated by worldly concerns, right? And if you think, no, I'm just whatever little things I'm doing, I'm really doing it unconditionally, isn't it? I'm not even expecting anything in return. I just, because, right, I can and I'm able to do that. So if you can find the sincerity and witness to yourself, right, and that's even better witness. So that's so that means you are not kind of putting a facade, right? Something like, okay, everything's nice. I don't kill anyone. I'm kind of a nice practice. Yeah, but that. So there's two types of witness we talk about. So being witness to one's own self is much more important, right? Yeah, just that. Yeah.
소소 대다 가지 소소 격주시 참바제다 원내시 소소 고두마라 다 고소라. 다티 그 뭐야 유튜브에다.
Yeah, we said your mind cannot be a concealed phenomenon or hidden to yourself because you should know what's going in your mind, right? Are you cheating or being like too smart or whatever you're trying to do, right? So if you have sincerity and authenticity in your mind during the practice, then that's it. Others don't need to know about it. Yeah, sure.
Well, but at the same time, it's so easy to hide this stuff because I could, let's say, for example, I could appear to myself as a nice person. And so, but what is appearing is this identity of an I that is nice.
Right.
And then, so it's not genuine.
What do you mean it's not genuine? Let's say, okay, let's play a role. I need some money, right? So you're going to give me some money. When you're giving me the money, so, I mean, do you do it with unconditionally?
But the motivation, even though it's, maybe I want to help you, but then I'm grasping out of me, there's the nice person, and the nice person is helping you.
I see. Okay,
so
okay.
that makes it inauthentic on that level as well.
Okay. So that's more concrete. Yeah. I'll go on this again. 지난번에 다 방법 뉴스는 들으다 이내다 배낭 가지고 냠래 챙겨러 지면 들어가게. 그 전에 침바도 굴로 야부자 당과 차샤로 와죠. 양 당은 잡으셔야 어떻더니 양그 당진 있어서 와게. 꼴직세로 왔다 얘들이 옷으로 제다 섬사 제너로 와게. 양고 직대스 디 차로 걸어 와. 그래서 디 차성부터 가고 싶도 와서 오게 와게. 그 장마 장자지 그 단지 내셔지면서 좀 와게.
In a way this action like validates the me and so it's all about me again.
Right. 다 지지들 소소소래 칠수 일하는 생각으로 와게. 드린 게 야고셔서 이네 야 나도 쉽심을 걸어. 드린 게 오스테이다 섬서저로게. 제주도 쌤 야고저 때래시네. 그래서 다 되게.
대대대세 뭐되게 제가 가서 넘기니 감자들 개와다 메가 수도 지고서 레통어서 메가 또 시작이야레스. 메가의 중국에서 강학까지 딱딱 그런 자고레스. 개와대 저와 그거는 뭐게 어서 중국에도 어디에 마상 쇼크하게 수부대 어디에 tako gewa shung do mo ko gewa rangsa de digara tate chor do kora ta yang ga shibin se ga ji ge ta nyam do ko se do
de ka tu na de ya gro da
ka to na ya gro namsa ji ga shibin sam ya kibo yi sam ji me da ga je sa de dugsha shibu ge ta jum ge se mal khadu cha do na digoro
yeah Geshe says yeah that's true that's the some kind of the challenge of being in the situation that we are. Even if you give it a good heart, so to speak, but then at the end you think, kind of it pops up that a little bit ego or something related to that. So that maybe this is the opportunity we say, I should rejoice in my virtue, but don't let the ego take over it. So maybe that's another opportunity. That's why, as Lamas say, even as practitioners, we're trying to do something, when it comes to doing something positive, something goes wrong or lacking somewhere in our case, isn't it? When it comes to negativity, everything comes like, 200% well. From the motivation to the actual, action to the conclusion. Like everything is, almost like is there something perfect, right? When it comes to practice, we try hard with the motivation, then something is not really done properly at the actual practice. If we do that very well, at the end, it doesn't conclude well, something goes limiting. But that does not mean that our virtue has become completely useless, right? We still cherish it. It is a virtue. But so we do our best to be able to do everything, the motivation, action, and conclusion in the best possible way. But at the same time, we acknowledge that we are deluded sentient beings, right? Sometimes these things come up, right?
Combining it then with noticing self-grasping is maybe the way to go. Is go, I'm serving this,
Right,
nice
so I
meal or
think
whatever
that's,
at this
yeah,
point.
Geshe said, to the extent we can prevent that, right? Oh, I did something right. Unless it's rejoicing, but if it's more like a self-grasping, then we should try to prevent it, or we should think like, oh, I cannot let my, practice to be marred by the self-grasping. Then think another practice, right? Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah. Go ahead. I'll give to Latmir now. Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah.
Geshe explained that at this moment we're trying to overcome the manifest forms of delusions.
Right.
Now, but I remember previously him explaining that in order to overcome the manifest form, not let them arise, we need to have achieved calm abiding. So it seems to me that also the presentation of this particular method for exchanging self with others is by Shantideva is in the chapter of calm abiding. It follows actually. It's after explaining all the prerequisites for calm abiding.
Okay.
So it seems to me that this
It's the assumption, right?
is this the assumption? Do we need to have in order to completely realize the exchange of self for others?
Right.
Do we need to
calm
have
abiding?
calm abiding?
Oh,
Yes.
sure.
Thank you.
Koran kan show they did again. That again kan I say when ngazo le tangbo mene kablia ta chi nyomo ngunju dikwa ngunju ka ri sro again. But the saben is setting mar sum bro again. Chido yang kasang yema de ba chi kono themen din des ko some ngazo nyomo kza ngunju be ka wala ken di ro shine top ko sing sro again. Shine. Bad ngunju go ne so ro again. Shidi ibana bena danda di takshen nyamje di kasada di shiwalagi tan chunchu na sundu gan ya da shine zu shul she sha sro again. Chido kali di shine top ko ba chili ya da ngunji chen ne ro again. Takshen nyamje gi nyamlen da tokpa che bala shine nge ba da top ko ko ba so ga. Di mena takshen nyamje gi tokpa che tu mar ba khares. Takshen nyamje ngone da chi nyong zo so ga ge tokpa che bala shine ngon de ro ko ko so ro again. No, sir. No, sir.
희능은 탑도 다 야가 그래. 같이 땡이지 때문에 심 가지 간도 땡이지 뭐도 거는 배 로직이 개와도 땡이도 더 니마지 개와 체중 요소 어디 도그러 와. 다시 잠재 셔와래 신의 탑 먹고 선지.
No, sir. Geshe would like to take the position that in order to be able to practice and realize exchanging self for others, we don't need calm abiding as a prerequisite. Of course, if you have a calm abiding, your practice will be much more stronger. It's just like we say, somebody who has a calm abiding practice for one day, and then somebody who doesn't have it practice for the whole year, because it's equal to the same virtue. Somebody has stability. It really adds power to the practice. But he said, it's not a prerequisite to exchanging self for others.
He's taking the position. Does that mean that there are other masters who have different positions?
This is again Shambazo yang deba karsora takshen nyamji ki tokwa ke bar ya shineng no do ko yor sungen ne yor bes ko da.
Dire peji yuje da desigudo kasa jidu yiksha do jena desigudo. Tiji semji be nyonga tambala digo 거다 hinne tabor s거다.
알아서.
시행 요래 야.
알아서.
남는 시분 걸 때도 요래 되니 메타바다 저주심도 hinne 타고 머리를 송도.
알아서.
요래. 다저 누지 뭐 보이기래야.
알아서. Geshe said yes. For example, the textbook author of Sereche College, Chijumba, he somewhere says that in order to have real bodhicitta experience, one must have calm abiding first, right? He takes that position. So, I mean, there could be, right, different perspectives taken on this. Yeah. No. Anyone? Okay, if not, we'll stop there. So we will do Manjushri in Tibetan and then in English. Kange Lode, Dimye, Tinda, Ninda, Namda, Rabsebe, Chinye, Dugwe, Jishin, Siche, Nije, Tugan, Lebam Zen, Kanda, Sebe, Senra, Mendon, Dungen, Jisebe, Dozo, Kula, Boje, Taze, Yela, Tuju, Yang, Joda, Shedo, Nyemo, Nyelo, Leje, Changro, Cheze, Maria, Mirze, Dungen, Nyugo, Chinye, Cheze, Radina, Dene, Daje, Saju, Yendeng, Lunzo, Gyeltsen, Tuyu, Gu, Chuda, Chuda, Chung, Dalu, Minzen, Jiang La, Du, Omara Bazana, Omara Bazana, Zende, Chuye, Chenra, Verse, Ye, Dalu, Temo, Mingba, Rapsene, Kada, Tenju, Shunglu, Lode, Nawan, Zendo, Lode, Gyaltsen, Yuzhong, Pega, Jing, Gesang, Pongwei, Chudo, Minba, Tenpa, Zenba, Wangdo, Jishu, Chanyan, Shogun, Jela, Sowan, De. Obeisance to my Guru and Protector Manjushri, who holds at his heart a scriptural text, symbolic of his seeing all things as they are, whose intelligence shines forth as the sun, unclouded by delusions or traces of ignorance, who teaches in 60 ways with the loving compassion of Father for his only Son, all creatures caught in the prison of samsara, confused in the darkness of their ignorance, overwhelmed by their suffering. You whose dragon thunder-like proclamation of Dharma arouses us from the stupor of our delusions and free us from the iron chains of our karma, who wields the sword of wisdom, hewing down suffering wherever sprouts appear, clearing away the darkness of ignorance. You who have been pure from the beginning, who have completed the stages achieving the highest perfection of a Bodhisattva, whose princely body is adorned with 112 marks of a Buddha, I bow down to you, Manjushri, Om Arabaza Nadi. O compassionate one, with the brilliance of your wisdom, illuminate the darkness enclosing my mind, enlighten my intelligence and wisdom, so that I may gain insight into Buddha's words and the texts that explain them. Like the sweet perfume of white lotus, born in the ocean of knowledge, nourishing honeybees, the fortunate beings, your fame pervades all directions. You are proficient and powerful in upholding the precious doctrine. To you, O Lord Tenzin Wangda, respectfully I pray.
Nhất tâm kính lễ Đức Văn Thù Sư Lợi, bậc đại trí ngài điều phục hai chướng ngại, tựa nhật quan lan tỏa khắp mười phương, bậc thực chứng chân nghĩa màu rốt ráo, từ tim ngài bát nhã kinh thủ hộ nhiệm màu, cõi luân hồi chúng sanh thọ nghiệp báo, bị ngăn che bởi phiền não vô minh, sở hữu 60 pháp âm thù thắng, cùng đại bi ngài hóa độ chúng sanh, tựa từ mẫu chăm lo cho quý tử. Tiếng rồng vang ngài thức tỉnh hữu tình, thoát khỏi vòng luân hồi nghiệp chướng. Tận diệt muôn vàn khổ đau cùng ách nạn, trường tử Như Lai tối thắng toàn giác. Ngài an trụ nơi thập địa pháp vân, báu thân ngài trang nghiêm thanh tịnh, 112 tướng hạo Như Lai, đê đầu đảnh lễ Đức Văn Thù Sư Lợi, cúi xin ngài tận diệt ám chướng vô minh. Om Arapasanadi. Con khẩn cầu dưới gót sen bậc đại trí, ban pháp lực diệt phiền não vô minh, được trí sáng con thâm nhập nghĩa màu, pháp vi diệu cùng muôn vàn luận giải. Như diệu hương ngọt ngào từ sen trắng, đàn xanh nơi trí thù thắng đại dương. Hồng danh ngài khắp mười phương quảng bá, đấng thiện xảo uy dũng bảo tồn pháp bảo vô giá. Nam mô Lúc Sang Tenzin Quang Đắc, xin cung kính trì niệm.
Chang Zhu Sen Zhu Rinpo Che Ma Ye Ba Nan Ye Zhu Je Ye Ba Nyang Ba Me Ba Yang Gong Ne Gong Dong Be Ba Zhu Dong Ni Da Ba Rinpo Che Ma Ye Ba Nan Ye Wa Nyang Ba Me Ba Yang Gong Ne Gong Be Ba Zhu Sa Ji Be Ji Zhu Ji Me Do Zhao Ri Ra Lin Ji Nin De Yin Ba De Sang Jie Xin Do Mi De Vi Ba Yi Zhu Gui Nang Da Xin La Zhi Ba Zhu Kang Ri Ra Vi Gu Vi Xin Gang De Pen Dang De Hua Ma Lu Zhong Me 现来是王定金家族也下边是的把天主日也当古主让那忙着那个你样的哟。